Here in New Hampshire, Nikki Haley has made an unholy alliance with rhinos, never Trumpers, Americans for no prosperity. Did you ever hear them? Did you ever hear them? Americans for no prosperity. I added the word no in.
I added the word no in. They're not Americans for prosperity. They're Americans for no prosperity. Donald Trump is back, and I think he's a polished version of the previous Donald Trump. Do you think that? It's very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Well. Happy Tuesday and welcome to hour number 3. That's how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop, right? 3. There is, the word crazy is being used a lot more than it used to be used because there's so much crazy going on. All those nutty Democrats. And I just mentioned in Davos, where the World Economic Forum, the WEF, we have to abbreviate it. It's got to be the WEF, not the World Economic Forum anymore. Now it's WEF. And they have a big powwow. It's a confab. It's all kinds of stuff. And they have people with French accents. And at Davos, they announced they're sitting there and they're having coffee, and they said they're experiencing inner struggles because coffee, as it turns out, is really bad for the environment. So Starbucks is going to have to be canceled. The Democrats might have to go loot every Starbucks store in America, which they're very fond of doing. They like looting. Looting is their thing. The D.C. City Council is looking at that. They might make looting illegal too. They don't want to, go too far. They should make crime illegal in Washington D.C. Then get more police because there are a lot of criminals committing a lot of crimes. Then the police can arrest them. Then they'd have to prosecute them, and that's where you run into the problem, I think. But at Davos, they had the thing. They're globalists, and they're meeting in Davos in Switzerland. And a Swiss banker named Hubert Keller, he said coffee drinkers should probably go to re-education camps. And I made up the re-education camp part. But you're a crime. You are a walking crime. You're a crime against the environment if you drink coffee. Because listen to what he had to say, a little back and forth, and talking about drinking coffee and how terrible it is and why you should stop drinking coffee.
Basically, the coffee that we all drink emits between 15 and 20 tons of CO2 per ton of coffee. Uh-huh. So we should all know that this is every time we drink coffee, we are basically putting CO2 into the atmosphere. Uh-huh. The other reason is because most of the coffee plantation, or most of the coffee is produced through monoculture. And monoculture is also affected by climate change. The quality of these nature assets is deteriorating quite rapidly.
And then he he saw a lady skunk go by, and he chased after the lady skunk because he could smell her skunk-like smell. And he turned into Pepe Le Pew right before our very eyes. Pepe.
You do not have to come with me to the Casbah. We are already here.
We are already here, the Casbah. Oh, sacre bleu, sacre bleu. Since he's talking about coffee, now every time you see a liberal drinking coffee, you've got to tell them that for every ton of coffee that is harvested, there are 15 to 20 tons of CO2 put into the environment, into the atmosphere. And therefore, if you're a liberal and you're drinking your $9 Starbucks coffee, you are killing the planet. You're killing Mother Earth. See? You're a murderer of Mother Earth. Isn't that terrible? One time many years ago when I was a young cub in the news business, I went to Vandenberg Air Force Base for the launch of an MX missile. And a bunch of liberals had gathered outside the gate, and they were on the ground pounding on their backs. kicking their feet and pounding their fists into the ground, crying, literally tears streaming down their faces, crying and screaming at the top of their lungs. They're killing my mother. They're killing my mother. Mother Earth. Saying the MX missile was going to kill their mother. It's going to kill Mother Earth. Now, I bet all those people are getting their coffee at Starbucks, which is really killing Mother Earth. And the MX missile helped save Mother Earth and all of humanity. Thanks to Ronald Reagan. You're welcome. And the patriarchy. You know. Really, I can't imagine being like a liberal leftist dimwit. You should thank the patriarchy every day. Every day when you get out of bed, you should get on your knees and pray and thank the patriarchy. Oh, speaking of global warming, this is important because it's your CO2, your Starbucks, and 1 ton of coffee, 15 to 20 tons of CO2. Make a note. Share it with a liberal. Just don't let them have any sharp objects because... But speaking of global warming, 20 people stranded on Lake Erie ice floe back on land after rescue operation. Lake Erie, which is all clean now and beautiful and very nice. And the people around Lake Erie are nice too. It's called Lake Erie, though. It doesn't sound perfect, does it? 15 miles on the Erie Canal and all that. 20 people stranded on Lake Erie ice floe. And when you say ice floe, flow is spelled F-L-O-E, F-L-O-E, not F-L-O, like Flo and Eddie. Like slow gin. No, like slow gin. What an alcoholic response. That is, it's not flow gin, it's slow gin. No, F-L-O-E. So 20 people stranded, 20 people rescued from ice floe on Catawba Island State Park. It's Catawba Island State Park, and they were fishing. They were fishing, people, and you do ice fishing and things like that. And 20 people because it's one of the Great Lakes. It's gigantic. And they were out there on the ice, and then it broke away. Oh, no. Like that polar bear on the ice floe. They were like that. They were like that polar bear, the one that Al Gore was so concerned about. There are 5 times as many polar bears today as there were in 1970. Everything that the Democrats say is... a lot of hooey. It's a lot of...
This is for real. It is not made up.
It is not made up. Yeah. And so what happened to Tipper Gore? She went away, right? Didn't she go away? Tipper. Her name's Tipper. They call her Tipper. Tipper. Yeah, that's... so we got that. And that French guy, he reminds me of that French lady. We have that French lady today. She has a French accent. She's a journalist, right? She's a journalist. And she loves Hamas. She loves Hamas. And she converted to Islam. What was she before?
Catholic.
She was a Catholic. And she converted to Islam because, she's a leftist. That's the thing about her. And where is she? Where is she on my... 19? She's number 19 on the big cut sheet here. And I have many, many sound actualities for you today. Here's the annoying journalist she converted to Islam, Dr. Miriam. She's a doctor, Dr.
Miriam Francois.
Yeah, and it's Francois, which is, means French, right? So you'll be surprised to learn that Dr. Miriam Francois, who is presumably a woman and definitely French, Dr. Miriam Francois, she converted to Islam and she loves Hamas and she doesn't like the Jews. And so naturally, I don't want to give it away like a spoiler alert. We'll listen to her and then see, because you can play along at home. What does she do? What does she do that's typically, that you might predict from a French woman? Here is Dr. Miriam Francois.
We are bombing one of the poorest countries in the world, that has been under a humanitarian blockade. There has been famine. These people have been decimated. And we are bombing them because a couple of guys in dinghies in support for the Palestinians who are having a genocide committed against them. They're objecting to that, and we're bombing them. Come on now.
Now, a couple of guys in dinghies, poor guys in dinghies. She's talking about the Houthis. The Houthi rebels, a terrorist group, she converted to Islam and now she's a terrorist. And she's got a plan. See, she's got a plan. because a couple of guys in dinghies, your anchor scratched my dinghy. Your dinghy scratched my anchor. Sorry, I got my Rodney Dangerfield backward. Your dinghy scratched my anchor. And so she's on Sky News, and Dr. Miriam Francois is there to defend. Hey, come on, a couple of, just because they're supporting the Hamas terrorist organization, and the Houthis also being funded by Iran. Boy, when she converts to Islam, she converts to Islam. But it gets better because she's got a plan.
I'm so sorry your Amazon packages are delayed. I really am. Like, I wish mine came on time. But, you know, genocide, guys, genocide. There are 2 mothers a day dying in Gaza right now. It's 109 days.
It's 109 days. Well, maybe they should release the hostages. What do you think? Maybe they should stop their genocidal quest to wipe out Israel from the river to the sea, which Democrats now chant in Harvard board meetings. But never mind that. So she loves the Houthis. She loves Hamas. The mothers today. Let's show the videos of the genital mutilation perpetrated by the savages. And while you're talking about this, we'll do big box, little box on the TV screen like that. But wait a minute. It's time to get French.
There are over 60,000 people injured with no access to food, water, aid. How dare we have a conversation about trade when there are children right now being treated without anesthetic? Well, there are things that require us to make some sacrifices, and this would be one of them.
They do have the global economy, global markets hostage.
Good for them.
Bill Browder.
Good for them. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now.
We're going to have to leave it there.
Sky News, and the anchor woman at Sky News just shaking her head saying, well, when? And she has to end. She's like, wanted to get the anchor one, get one final question. And she's slapping the desk saying, ceasefire now, ceasefire now. She's Francois, but she learned to speak English from the British, and so she has a British accent. But what does she want to do that's typically French? Surrender. She wants to surrender. She, French rifle sale. Never used, only dropped once. That's the never used, only dropped once, French rifle sale. That's why are the boulevards of Paris lined with trees? Why are the boulevards of Paris lined with trees? So the Germans can march in the shade. See, so the Germans can march in the shade. And that's the thing. So ceasefire now, says Dr. Francois. Boy, if they weren't surrendering, what would they be doing? So, surrender culture. They got that Arc de Surrender in Paris. You ever been to the Arc de Surrender? The Arc de Surrender. That's remarkable stuff. You're a Democrat Party. I'm telling you. All right, now I still haven't gotten to the politics, but I will. Right now we don't have a ton of time, but let's go to Greg, calling from Chicago, Illinois, listening on the great WLS. Greg, you are on the Chris Plant Show.
Well, hi, Chris. I love your show. You're always on topic. You're always funny. I've got a question. If a ton of coffee puts all these tons of CO2 into the air, how do they weigh the CO2 if it's a gas?
Don't get all technical with them. They're the party of science. Political science and science fiction. And, they can weigh gas. They have to, because they're all their heroes are gas bags, and they can wear, it's like Michael Moore. You can weigh Michael Moore, and he's a gas, not an inert gas. That is a fair question. How do they weigh CO2 gas? And tell us how many tons there are of, because normally gas, if it's the kind of gas that floats up into the atmosphere, that's lighter than air, right? That's lighter than air gas.
That's my thought. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So how do you weigh? Where is the scale where they weigh gases that are lighter than air?
Maybe they weigh the people at Davos and then multiply it times 10 or something.
It's possible that they weigh the people at Davos and then multiply by 10. That is a very interesting question, Greg. There are tons, and they talk about it constantly. I know how to weigh a ton of coffee. That I can do. But how do you weigh a ton of gas? It's possible that Michael Moore could answer that question. They're the party of science. They think there are 130 genders. Party of science. All right? And they think that your genitals do not define your gender, but if you remove your genitals, then that's how you affirm your gender. See? They're the party of science. We should bow to the great party of science, the Democrat Party. Hey, it's Chris Plant, excited to tell you about our July 2024 Listener Sea Cruise. We'll be sailing around the British Isles, visiting Scotland and Ireland. Please join us. Visit chrisplantcruise.com. Yeah, I haven't even gotten to the Supreme Court yesterday siding with the Biden administration over Texas on the razor wire and how interesting that is. And John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett siding with, and they determined based on the law and the Constitution, not on politics. Every single Democrat nominee on the court always goes 100% of the time with the party and never deviates. It's never based on the law or the Constitution with the left-wing nominees to the court, which is why the Democrat Party wants to pack the court with other like-minded lefties that will always side with the party, goose-stepping obediently to the party line, as every Democrat on the Supreme Court always does. And you can rely on the conservative nominees to the court to consider the law, weigh the law, the Constitution, and render judgment. And they're not always predictable. And it's certainly been true of President Trump's picks, his nominees for the Supreme Court. They have been reliable jurists, but not predictable jurists, because they may not always come down on the side that you might presume the Republican Party or conservatives would prefer or President Trump would prefer. But that's your Democrat Party. And I'm not, dug in deep enough to the thinking. I haven't read the opinions and the dissenting opinions in these in this particular case. But I actually have confidence in Amy Coney Barrett and to a lesser extent, Judge John Roberts. But, this is how it works. You rule based on the law and the Constitution. That's what I'm saying. Adam Housley at Fox News said, "While I'm at it, just a question, how many times in the last 15 years have liberal justices crossed over and voted with the conservative ones? Meantime, how many times has it happened counting today, right, that conservatives don't just go with the conservative party line? The left, they want the party line. Crazy. I'm telling you. Also on, Trump and Republicans being fascists, David Harsanyi tweets, "Scary. If he's elected, President Trump might start throwing candidates off ballots like in Senegal, pressuring tech companies to censor opposition like they did in 2020, and ignore the Supreme Court like on the border." All right, Rachel Maddow, she's on MSDNC. She was talking to Jen Psaki, who is an anchor on MSDNC. She is, of course, the former Biden White House press secretary with the gasoline-colored hair. She looks a lot like, in From Russia with Love, the Colonel Klebb, and old James Bond movie. But so Rachel Maddow coming from home because they pay her $30 million a year, so every now and then she's got to turn on her iPad and do a little TV. And they're still spreading this terrorism thing, this terror, the horror. And this is what David Harsanyi was referring to when he was mocking the suggestion that Trump is going to be a dictator. He was president for 4 years. Can you name anything that he did that was dictatorial while he was president for 4 years? And I welcome any, liberal, left-wing, mentally ill person to call in. We're at 888-630-9625. And explain to me what President Trump did while president that was dictatorial in any way. Can you? I know tweets, but that's not dictatorial. That's just kind of Queens, New York. Pay no attention. So here's Rachel Maddow on the television from her living room.
I think that there's a very simple reason that Trump is making that the closing argument in what may be the last contested primary. And it's because that's really what he's offering. I mean, this is the special sauce. Donald Trump is not leading the Republican Party and leading the Republican field of candidates because of his youthful vigor or because of his policy preferences.
And Jen Psaki's laughing at there. Well, compared to the cadaver that's living in the White House right now, he's Kip Keino. I use Kip Keino because that's it's old. He was a world champion runner.
There's none of that is going on. What he's offering is what he both sort of inherently offers and now more and more explicitly offers, which is if you pick me, that'll be the end of politics.
That'll be the end of politics.
You won't have to deal with politics anymore. You won't have to deal with
that's right. That'll be the end.
Contested elections. You won't have to deal with contests or divisions when it comes to power.
Right.
You'll have a strongman leader and I'll just do what I want. And
sure.
Won't that be a lot simpler?
Yeah.
That's what he's offering. That
strongman
model is what the Republican base is enthused about. And
that's right. The whole Republican base that's what the Republican base is enthused about, is the strongman model where it would be the end of politics. It'd be the end of politics. And that's where David Harsanyi at The Federalist wrote, if he's elected, he might start throwing candidates off ballots. I told you Hawaii and all the other states where the Democrats are trying to throw President Trump off of ballots, and how it parallels perfectly what's happening in Senegal right now, which is not a first world country. And David Harsanyi at The Federalist says, maybe he'll pressure tech companies to censor the opposition, like the FBI did, getting Twitter and Facebook on the horn. Don't let people share that story about Hunter Biden's laptop and Joe Biden's the big guy who gets 10%. Got to stop that. Sig Heil, FBI. And wait a minute, who's censoring speech? And David Harsanyi says, and ignore the Supreme Court, because Joe Biden was told by the Supreme Court, that he can't just allow the open borders and that, millions and millions of people coming into the country illegally, and you can't just wave everybody in and give everybody the student loan debt relief of what is $136 billion now. And the Supreme Court told him you can't do that. You can't. This is the role of the Congress. We have branches of government and separation of powers, and the so-called purse strings are controlled by the Congress, and in particular the House of Representatives. And you can't just take $136 billion and hand it out like walking around money on Election Day in Chicago with the crooked Democrat Party corrupt machine. But he's gone national with this, and the Supreme Court said you can't do it. And he said, screw the Supreme Court. We're going to pack the Supreme Court, and we're going to pack the Senate and give senators to Puerto Rico and D.C. who will carry guns and shoot people in crowds, which might be illegal in D.C. soon. Honestly, if you want to shoot people in crowds in D.C., do it now. It could be illegal soon. But for now, it's okay. And so David is exactly right. And then again, what did President Trump do that was dictatorial? Anything? Secure our border? Remember, Barack Obama put children in cages and then threw them into wood chippers and made a mulch out of them. I made up the last part, but maybe next time around. Honestly. All right, we've got, look at the time. We've got to get to, let's get to President Trump. Well, you know what? First, let's get to Joe Biden. Let's go to number 17. Because Joe Biden yesterday proved once again that he's not fit to be president, that he's not up to the job. And they are announcing, it was learned yesterday, new book and all that Joe Biden didn't want Kamala Harris. He wanted Governor Whitmer Democrat out of Michigan. And Jill Biden didn't like Kamala Harris either, didn't think she was up to the job. But never mind that. That's okay. Yesterday, Joe Biden, because he's a racist, he confused his cabinet secretaries because he doesn't know who they are. He looks at them and he thinks, one kind of Cuban-looking guy is pretty much the same as another Cuban-looking guy. And Joe Biden confuses them. And that is no problem with the New York Times or CNN. Why would that be a problem? Honestly. So Joe Biden, 81 years old now, confused Javier Becerra and Alejandro Mayorkas. And the Daily Mail out of the United Kingdom is covering it, and the Washington Post is not, because they're not a news organization. So here's the event. President Joe Biden appeared to mix up two of his cabinet secretaries during televised remarks at the White House on Monday. Just the latest stumble amid a focus on his age and acuity, or lack thereof. Joe Biden at the White House yesterday.
I'd also like to thank the gender policy advisor, my gender policy advisor.
He's got a gender policy.
Jen, where's Jen sitting?
Where's Jen?
There you are, Jen.
He's got gender policy.
And Secretary Becerra sitting right next to her for their leadership in this task force.
No, that's Alejandro Mayorkas. Sorry, that is not Secretary Becerra. Sitting next to that is Alejandro Mayorkas. He doesn't know his cabinet members. He doesn't know the reporters. They give him little cheat cards with pictures of the reporter's face. He is a mental dwarf in a thimble trying to get out. Help, help. Who's sitting there, Jen? Jen, are you there, Jen? He can't see. Help me, help me. 81 years old, pointing to his right. Thank you. And Secretary Becerra sitting right next to her for the leadership. I mean, thank you for the leadership, but he lost a few words there. In this task force on gender, they got a task force on gender. They're going to change everyone's gender. Every Democrat is doing a gender swap. Let's go back to the beginning of our audio. And President Trump, we played President Trump talking about how Nikki Haley made an unholy alliance with the rhinos and the never Trumpers. And then he continued last night in New Hampshire.
Think of it. I would now be rounding out my term. In other words, if they didn't do all these things, and I could name 10 more or more, I'd now be rounding it out. It would almost be over. But because they did mess with me, now they've got us and me for 4 more years.
Ben, he's going to be a dictator. He's going to remove his political rivals from the ballot, ignore the Supreme Court, steal $137 billion to spread it around to would-be voters, which is what Joe Biden has done, but our media is good with that. President Trump last night.
When I was commander-in-chief, Iran was a weak, broke, and it was ready to make a deal. They were weak, they were broke, and ready to make a deal. Then Biden came in and surrendered everything. Under my leadership, we will restore peace through strength.
Peace through strength, the economy, and Iran, she's a broke, she's a no good, she's a brain, she's a broke, as a Joe Biden's a brain. That's not a good brain. Vivek Ramaswamy came up on stage and took the microphone, and I got to say, he's very good on his feet, and he looked like he was just doing it off the top of his head, extemporaneously, talking about Trump's next term, his second term as president. And that's what President Trump was talking about. I'd be rounding the turn in my, this would be the end of year 3 in his second term had a variety of things not happened.
If you want to seal the border, vote Trump. If you want to restore law and order in this country, vote Trump. If you want to defeat the deep state, vote Trump. If you want to fight inflation, vote Trump. If you want to revive national pride in this country, vote Trump. If you want to revive our national identity in this country, vote Trump. If you want to make America great again, vote Trump. That's how we're going to win this in a landslide in November.
I got to tell you, got to keep Vivek on the campaign trail. He is very good on his feet. I saw him speaking at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington a couple of years ago at the Daily Caller's annual dinner, their gala dinner. And it was the first time I had seen him. I said, Mano Manischewitz, that guy is good. And he's very good on his feet. Very good indeed. Yes, sir. Now, Nikki Haley, she's in New Hampshire too. She's not going to win. Today is the day to vote. And the Democrats, let's just a little Nikki Haley, then we'll move on.
So what I will say to Donald Trump is, if you had that political elite, you can have them. Because that's never who I wanted to work for. I always wanted to serve the people. And now we're in that situation again.
Can you get me a beer? So she said she wanted to serve the people. Oh, yeah. Hey, and maybe, a little bowl of the peanuts and get me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. Now let's go to the fake number 8. Because somebody, we don't know who, it's a mystery. It could be Russians. Could be the Russian disinformation. Somebody produced a fake robocall, presumably fake. Maybe Joe Biden did it and he just doesn't remember. But a fake robocall going out to Democrats, presumably, and maybe independents who may swing this thing one way or the other in New Hampshire because they have some kind of funny rules there when it comes to voting. But fake robocall that's supposed to be Joe Biden's voice, and maybe it is, maybe it's AI, maybe it's cobbled together, who knows. But here's a lot of people in New Hampshire getting this robocall telling them not to vote today. And they put somebody in prison for, the left did, for putting out a funny tweet making fun of Hillary Clinton. Remember that? And the Democrats put that young guy in prison for doing a joke on Twitter because they're like Hitler. They really are, and they're going to take you off the ballot.
What a bunch of malarkey.
It's malarkey.
We know the value of voting Democratic when our votes count. It's important that you save your vote for the November election. We'll need your help in electing Democrats up and down the ticket. Voting this Tuesday only enables the Republicans in their quest to elect Donald Trump again.
Don't vote.
Your vote makes a difference in November, not this Tuesday.
Wow, that's a devious, sinister. Now, what is that young guy put out a tweet saying, oh, you could vote online, right? Saying you could vote online. And the Democrats literally put him in prison. Nobody that attacked the White House for 3 days in 2020 was put in prison, but a funny tweet making fun of stupid people will get you a prison sentence in Adolf Hitler's America, Hillary Clinton's America. Now, New Hampshire voters out there on the street also, the Democrats are saying, write in Joe Biden's name, write in his name, because he's not on the ballot, because the Democrats are racists and they want South Carolina to be first. And they could care less about, because they're pandering to race and they've got problems in the polls with African-American voters because they're the party of the KKK. And so Man on the Street interviews Fox News with would-be Joe Biden voters if he were only on the ballot.
Well, I'm kind of angry about it. And some people have said, why should we write his name in when he won't even give us the time of day?
He won't give you the time of day. He's not even in New Hampshire. He's not coming. He's not on the ballot. They don't care. And he's in a coma. He sleeps in an iron lung in the basement of the White House at night. Nice New Hampshire voters.
We're disappointed this year not to have the Democratic primary. And that's why we're doing this, because it's not meaningless like the DNC says. It really is meaningful.
So they're not voting for Joe Biden, and they're not writing him in, even though they're told to write him in at the last minute because they didn't put him on the ballot, because they're pandering to the black vote, because they're the party of the Confederate States of America, and black people shouldn't be voting for the party of Jim Crow and the party of standing in schoolhouse doors. New Hampshire voters.
The Democratic National Committee has said that the primary, the Democratic primary here is not relevant or real, and I think that's just nonsense.
I think that's just nonsense. Well, the Democrats will tell you what to think, and if they want your opinion, they'll give it to you. That's the Democrat Party. And they'll take your candidate off the ballot, and they'll ignore the Supreme Court and buy votes by paying off student loans so middle-class people in the Dakotas can pay the student loans of Harvard grads that think that communism is the bee's knees and capitalism is bad. And Joe Biden has a gender policy advisor because he needs to be advised on gender policy because the Democrat Party. How much more can I get to? Just see Steve Garvey, the great baseball legend, running for the Senate in California, had a little back and forth with the inchworm, Adam Schiff. Well, we're going to put Steve Garvey, baseball legend, and Adam Schiff on hold. Don't we have enough time to get in all of that? It turns out the Biden administration has released 6.2 million illegal aliens into the country so far, usually using this parole, they call it parole loophole. And another remarkable story as well, America First Legal A lawsuit reveals that the Democrats, knew about the risks of mail-out balloting. The Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, that's an actual government agency, and they were fully aware of the risks of mail-out ballots before the 2020 election. But the bureaucracy, the permanent bureaucracy, stayed silent on that because they're Democrats in the machine and they're monkey wrenching the system. You know, that's their thing. Let's take one more. We have too much audio to get to, and we can't get to it all. Let's go to Patrick, calling from Pensacola, Florida. Patrick, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Good morning, Chris. How are you?
Very well, Patrick. Thank you.
Good. I actually, you probably don't remember, you talked to thousands of people, but I talked to you in 2020. And I just had a question similar to my last call, and then I had a theory. The question is, if we're so aware and been aware of what the Democrats are going to do in the 2024 election, how is it that general people like me out there are scratching their heads going, if we know what's coming and how they're going to do it, why can't we do anything to stop it?
Well, that's a very fair question, and this is where Republican elected officials are supposed to come into play. It's also, Patrick, dare I say, where the news media is supposed to come into play. But the news media, as you likely know, is the most corrupt institution in the United States of America, and they're in the back pocket and the front pocket and the hip pocket of the Democrat Party, and they're wriggling and writhing around, giving the Democrat Party pleasure, because that's the role of our news media today. Rather than holding the powerful accountable, there is, in fact, a merger of state and corporate power in America between the Democratic Party and only the Democratic Party, which isn't Democratic, and the American media industrial complex. And that serves to corrupt our entire political system from start to finish. That's their role, you know.